You're useless now." The words slipped from my daughter's lips as easily as autumn leaves drift across our yard here in Burlington, Vermont. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the one my late husband Richard had built with his own hands 42 years ago. Coffee cooled in our cups while the Methodist church bells chimed in the distance, marking 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. My name is Marion Caldwell. I'm 67 years old. I never imagined my own daughter, Elaine, could say those words to me. Let me tell you what led to this moment. I've always been a dedicated teacher. For 35 years, I taught literature to teenagers at Burlington High School. We weren't rich, but our family never wanted for anything. Richard and I raised 3 children, Elaine, now 42, Thomas, 39, and little Abigail, 36. They grew up in this modest 2-story house overlooking Lake Champlain, where the gray waters now reflect my own state of mind these past 8 months. Elaine was always the ambitious one, smart, determined, with an energy that exhausted you just watching her. She graduated with a business degree, moved to Boston, and kept in touch through brief calls and hurried Christmas visits. Her husband, Jeffrey, 45, a cordial but distant man, worked in finance. They have twin daughters, Olivia and Hannah, 14, whom I barely know. It was on Richard's birthday, 3 months after his passing from a silent heart attack while working in the garden, that I received Elaine's call. "Mom, I need to tell you something important. I'm coming to Burlington tomorrow." Her voice sounded different, electric, eager. I found it strange, as Elaine rarely visited outside of holidays. When she arrived, she was unrecognizable. Not physically, but something in her had shifted. She wore expensive clothes, drove a new car, brought extravagant gifts. "Mom, I made it. I finally made it," she said, pouring champagne into glasses that had never seen such expensive drink. "Jeffrey and I invested in a tech startup, and it just got bought for millions." Her eyes gleamed with an almost feverish glow. "We're rich now, obscenely rich." I was genuinely happy for her, of course, but also confused by the intensity of her transformation. Within weeks, I realized that money hadn't just changed her lifestyle, it had changed her heart. This was the first small turning point I felt, though I didn't yet know where it would lead us. Thomas and his wife Claire, 37, a teacher like me, came to dinner with us that night. My son has always been the thoughtful one, the mediator, so much like Richard in his calm way of solving problems. Elaine talked endlessly about international trips, properties, investments. Thomas smiled politely, but I sensed his discomfort. His children, Peter, 10, and Lily, 7, played in the yard, oblivious to the growing tension at the table. It was Claire who broke the uncomfortable silence. "And you, Marion? How are you adapting without Richard?" Before I could answer, Elaine interrupted. "I'm trying to convince Mom to sell this old house. She doesn't need this huge place anymore." Thomas looked at me. "Mom loves this house. Dad built everything here." "Exactly," Elaine replied, irritated. "She's living in the past. She needs to move forward." I felt a stab in my heart. It wasn't just a house. It was memories. It was my life with Richard. The next day, as we drank coffee, Elaine placed some papers on the table. "I found a perfect condo for you in Boston, near my house. You can move in a few weeks." I froze. "But I don't want to move, Elaine. My life is here." She sighed, impatient. "Mom, be reasonable. What do you have here? An old house full of sad memories and bills to pay. Let me help you." "I don't need help," I replied, feeling a firmness I hadn't shown in a long time. "I have my retirement friends, my book club, my garden." That's when she said it, looking directly into my eyes. "You're useless now, Mom. Without Dad, without students, without purpose. Let me give meaning to your life." The words hit like a knife. I barely recognized my daughter. This was the second turning point, deeper and more painful. Money hadn't just changed Elaine. It had given her a sense of power over me, as if my life now belonged to her to rearrange as she saw fit. In the days that followed, Elaine began acting as if my refusal was just a temporary obstacle. She brought real estate agents, decorators, a lawyer. Just to evaluate options, Mom, she'd say, but I knew she had already decided. One afternoon, returning from the grocery store, I found her removing the old wall clock that Richard loved. "This is going to auction," she commented casually. Something inside me broke. "Put it back," I said, with a voice that didn't sound like my own. "Now," Elaine laughed. "You're being irrational. It's just an old clock." That clock had marked every important moment in our lives: births, graduations, anniversaries. It wasn't just a clock. Abigail, my youngest, arrived that night. Always the most sensitive of the three, she worked as a nurse at a children's hospital in Portland. She immediately noticed the tension. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking from me to Elaine. When Elaine explained her plans, Abigail was horrified. "You can't decide this for Mom. This house is hers." A terrible argument followed, words that should never be spoken between sisters, between mother and daughters. "You've always been the perfect daughter, haven't you, Abby?" Elaine shouted. "Always taking care of everyone, always doing what's right. Well, I worked myself to exhaustion to build something, to be successful." Abigail, normally so calm, responded firmly. "Success? Is that what you call what you're doing to Mom? Money doesn't give you the right to control her life." I sat on the porch that night, after they both went to bed. The lake reflected the moon in silver fragments, like the pieces of my heart. What had happened to my daughter? What had happened to our family? That's when the phone rang. It was Thomas. "Mom, I just talked to Jeffrey." His voice sounded strange, worried. "There's something you need to know about Elaine's money." This was the third turning point, which completely changed the course of our story. Jeffrey had secretly called Thomas, concerned. The startup they invested in was under investigation for fraud. The money they received, millions, could be confiscated at any moment. Jeffrey was desperate, but Elaine refused to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. "She's in denial," Thomas explained. "Jeffrey says she keeps spending as if nothing's happening. She's buying properties, investing in art, donating to charities, all to impress the right people." I felt a chill. "Is that why she wants my house so badly?" "I think so, Mom. The house is in your name, free of debt. If she can get you to sell and invest the money in their business—" Thomas didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood the plan. My house would be an asset protected from the investigation, a lifeline for the lifestyle Elaine didn't want to lose. The next morning at breakfast, I observed my eldest daughter with new eyes. Behind the excessive confidence, I noticed fear. Behind the arrogance, desperation. She wasn't trying to help me. She was drowning and trying to use my life as a buoy. "Elaine," I began calmly, "we need to talk about your investments." She froze, coffee cup halfway to her mouth. "What do you know about that?" Her voice trembled slightly, enough to understand why you're so interested in my house. At that moment, Abigail entered the kitchen, followed by the mailman who brought a registered letter for Elaine. She opened it, and I saw her face turn pale. "It's from the company's lawyer. We're being sued." Her hands shook. Everything is going to end." This was the fourth turning point that deepened the suffering and moral dilemma. The house of cards was beginning to collapse. In the weeks that followed, we witnessed Elaine's meteoric fall. News spread quickly in Burlington. The startup founders were arrested. Jeffrey filed for divorce, claiming Elaine had deceived him about the extent of her involvement. The twins went to live with him. One day, while I was working in the garden, planting the daffodils Richard loved so much, Elaine appeared at the gate. I hadn't seen her in almost a month. She was unrecognizable. Thin, haggard, without the arrogance of her days of false wealth. "May I come in?" she asked, almost a whisper. I nodded. In the kitchen, I served her a cup of chamomile tea. The sweet, gentle aroma contrasted with the bitterness of the moment. We sat in silence for a while. "I lost everything, Mom," she finally said. "The house in Boston, the money, Jeffrey, the girls." Tears streamed down her face. "And I almost lost you too." At that moment, I could have said, "I told you so," or "You deserved it." But I looked at my daughter and saw beyond the 42-year-old woman. I saw the 7-year-old girl who cried when she fell off her bike, The 16-year-old teenager devastated by her first heartbreak. The 22-year-old young woman determined to conquer the world. "What will you do now?" I asked softly. "I don't know." She seemed lost, like a child. Maybe go back to college. I always wanted to teach, like you." This confession surprised me. It was the fifth turning point, revealing a side of Elaine I didn't know. "You can stay here while you decide," I offered. Her eyes widened. "After everything I said, everything I did?" "You're my daughter, Elaine. That never changed." The following months were difficult. Elaine faced lawsuits, testimonies, public shame. Thomas and Abigail, initially reluctant, eventually softened when they saw their sister's genuine remorse. Together as a family, we began rebuilding bridges. One evening, we all sat on the porch, me, my 3 children, and my 4 grandchildren. The sun was setting over Lake Champlain, painting the sky orange and purple. Elaine now worked as an administrative assistant at the same school where I taught for decades, rebuilding her life with humility. She was renting a small apartment nearby, and the twins came to spend alternate weekends. "You know, Mom," said Elaine as we watched the children running through the garden, "I learned something important from all this." I waited for her to continue. "True wealth isn't what you have. It's who stands beside you when you lose everything." That night, lying in the bed I shared with Richard for 4 decades, I realized the 6th turning point. Money hadn't just revealed the worst in Elaine. Losing it was revealing the best. A year passed since that terrible morning in the kitchen. The house still stands, as do we. Elaine was accepted into a master's program in education. On Sunday mornings, she comes for coffee with me before church. We talk about books, about grandchildren, about abandoned and rediscovered dreams. It was on one of those mornings that Elaine handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," she replied. Inside was a letter from the university where Richard and I met. Elaine had created a scholarship in her father's name, using the little money she had managed to save in recent months. "For students from teachers' families," she explained. "People like us." This was the 7th turning point. My daughter wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was honoring our values, our legacy. That night, I took the family photo album from the attic. On the first page, a photo of Richard and me on our wedding day. On the last pages, empty spaces waiting for new moments. Between them, the story of our family. Imperfect, complicated, real. The 8th turning point came when Elaine invited me to give a lecture to her students about classic literature. Entering the classroom, I saw in her eyes something that had disappeared long ago: admiration. "This is my mother," she introduced me, "one of the wisest people I know." The 9th turning point happened when Jeffrey asked to talk to me. We met at a downtown cafe. "Marion," he said with sincerity in his eyes, "I think I made a mistake. Elaine has changed, really changed. The girls miss her." I didn't respond immediately. "You're not asking for my permission, are you?" "No," he smiled slightly. "I'm asking for your wisdom. How does someone start over after so much pain?" "One day at a time," I answered, thinking of all the lonely dawns after Richard's death, and with a lot of forgiveness, from others and from yourself. The 10th and most important turning point came last night. We were all gathered for Thomas's birthday. After the children went to sleep, Elaine asked to speak with me privately. In Richard's study, now transformed into my reading refuge, she looked at me with moist eyes. "Mom, I need to tell you something I've never told anyone." I sat down, concerned about what was coming. That day when I said you were useless, it wasn't about you, it was about me. She took a deep breath. "All my life, I tried to be different from you. I wanted more money, more power, more recognition, and when I got it, or thought I had, I realized I still felt empty." "Why?" I asked softly. "Because deep down, I knew I would never be as strong as you. You raised 3 children while building a career. You lost your husband and remained standing. You lived within your means and still had a life rich in meaning." Her tears now flowed freely. "When I said you were useless, It was because your mere existence reminded me of everything I couldn't be. At that moment, I finally understood. This was the guarded truth that changed the meaning of everything. "Oh, Elaine," I whispered, embracing her. "You didn't need to be like me. You just needed to be yourself." Today, sitting on the porch as the sun rises over the lake, I realize that no sudden wealth could buy what I have now: a healed family, a rediscovered daughter, a legacy of love that survives beyond pain. I learned that a mother's heart never completely closes, even when wounded, and that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what really matters. Elaine discovered this the hard way, but today, when I see her teaching her students with passion and humility, I know her fall was necessary for her flight. And I, who thought I was no longer useful, discovered that my greatest value was simply being here. Steady as the Vermont mountains, constant as the waters of Champlain. A broken heart can indeed find peace when truth comes to light, and our truth is this: a person's worth was never in what they possess, but in the love they are capable of giving and receiving, even after the most devastating storms. Have you ever had to watch someone you love lose their way before finding themselves again? I often think about that terrible morning when Elaine's words cut through me like a winter wind off Lake Champlain. The phrase, "you're useless now," didn't just wound me, it made me question my entire existence. Had I truly become irrelevant once my husband died and my teaching career ended? For weeks after that conversation, I would wake before dawn, my bedroom still dark, Richard's side of the bed empty and cold. I'd lie there watching shadows play across the ceiling, wondering if Elaine was right. Without students to teach or a husband to care for, what purpose did I serve? The isolation grew as Elaine began her campaign to help me. Each visit brought new real estate brochures, retirement community pamphlets, and thinly veiled suggestions that my life in Burlington had reached its natural conclusion. "Boston has excellent medical facilities, Mom," she'd say, as if I were already infirm at 67, "and you'd be close enough to see the twins every weekend." But the twins barely knew me. Elaine had made sure of that, keeping her sophisticated Boston life separate from her small-town upbringing. When Olivia and Hannah visited, they spoke in whispers and looked uncomfortable in my living room, their eyes constantly on their phones. They were strangers wearing my granddaughters' faces. One evening, as I sorted through Richard's clothes, a task I'd postponed for months, I found a small notebook in his jacket pocket. Inside, in his neat engineer's handwriting, were notes for my birthday gift. He'd been planning to surprise me with a trip to England to visit the homes of the authors I'd taught about for decades. Austen, Bronte, Dickens, a literary pilgrimage he knew I'd always dreamed of. The date in the notebook was 3 days before his heart attack. He'd never gotten to share his plan with me. I sat on our bedroom floor, clutching his jacket to my chest, breathing in the fading scent of him, and wept for the first time since the funeral. Not just for Richard, but for myself. For the woman who'd lost her partner and now faced losing her home, her independence, her very identity. When Thomas called the next morning, I could barely speak through my exhaustion. "Mom?" His voice tensed with concern. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, the way mothers do to protect their children. "Just a bad night." There was a pause. "Is Elaine pressuring you again about selling the house?" I sighed. Thomas had always been perceptive. "She means well," I said, though the words felt hollow. "No, Mom. She means what's convenient for her." His tone hardened. "Claire and I have been talking. We want you to know that whatever you decide about the house, it should be your decision, not Elaine's." His support warmed me, but I didn't want to create division between my children. "Your sister just wants what's best for me." "Does she?" Thomas asked quietly. "Or does she want what's best for her image? The successful daughter taking care of her aging mother?" The question lingered long after we hung up. Was Elaine's sudden interest in my welfare genuine, or was I just another acquisition in her new life of wealth and status? The answer came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Elaine arrived unannounced, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She had a man with her, tall, gray-haired, carrying a leather portfolio. "Mom, this is Mr. Harrington. He's an estate planner." She smiled brightly. "I've taken the liberty of having him prepare some documents for you." I stood in my doorway, still holding a watering can for my porch flowers. "Documents? Nothing to worry about." Elaine ushered him past me into the living room. "Just some paperwork to protect your assets. And ours." Ours. The word hung in the air like a warning. Mr. Harrington spread papers across the coffee table, the table where Richard and I had played Scrabble every Sunday night for 40 years. "Mrs. Caldwell, these documents will create a family trust. Your house and other assets would be placed in this trust, with your daughter as trustee." "Meaning?" "Meaning I would help manage your finances," Elaine interjected. "It's for your protection, Mom." I set down the watering can and looked at the man. "And if I wanted to sell the house later?" He glanced at Elaine before answering. "Any major decisions would require the trustee's approval." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "So I would need my daughter's permission to sell my own home?" "It's not like that," Elaine said quickly. "It's just a safeguard." "Against what?" I asked. "Against me making my own decisions?" Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should give you two a moment." He stepped onto the porch, leaving us alone. Elaine's smile disappeared. "Why are you being difficult about this? I'm trying to help you." "By taking control of my house? The house your father built?" "The house that's too big for you now. The house that's becoming a burden." She gestured around. "Look at this place, Mom. The paint is peeling. The roof probably needs work. How will you manage?" "The same way I've managed everything else since your father died. One day at a time." She made a sound of exasperation. "This isn't about your independence. It's about being practical." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "Then why not just offer financial help without taking control? Why not respect my wishes?" "Because you're not thinking clearly." Her voice rose. "You're clinging to this place out of sentimentality. It's not healthy." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Behind the expensive clothes and confident posture, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Desperation, a tightness around her eyes, a tension in her shoulders. "Elaine," I said slowly, "what's really going on? Why this sudden urgency about my house?" For a moment, her mask slipped. Fear flashed across her face before she composed herself. "Nothing's going on. I just want what's best for you." But there was something in her voice, a slight tremor that hadn't been there before, and I remembered what Richard always said about our eldest. Elaine never asks for help. She demands solutions to problems she won't admit having. I walked to the door and spoke to Mr. Harrington. "Thank you for coming, but I won't be signing anything today." After he left, Elaine and I faced each other in a silence thick with unspoken words. Finally, she grabbed her designer purse. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I conceded, "but it's my mistake to make." As her car disappeared down the driveway, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Richard died. The solid ground of my own judgment beneath my feet. That night, I called Abigail. Unlike her sister, my youngest had inherited Richard's thoughtful nature and my tendency to see beneath surfaces. She listened without interrupting as I described Elaine's visit. "Mom," she said finally, "something's not right. This isn't just about you or the house." "What do you mean?" "I talked to Jeffrey last week. He seemed off, nervous. He mentioned something about investments and regulatory issues, then changed the subject." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "You think they're in some kind of trouble?" "I don't know," Abigail admitted. "But Elaine's behavior isn't normal, even for her. The sudden wealth, the pushing you about the house, the trust documents. It feels like she's scrambling." After we hung up, I sat on the porch swing Richard had hung the summer before he died. The night was clear, stars scattered across the Vermont sky like diamond dust. I thought about my daughter, the little girl who'd once declared she would be the richest person in the whole wide world when she grew up, who'd worked through college, taking double course loads and weekend jobs, who'd married Jeffrey not just for love, but for the doors his family connections might open. Elaine had always hungered for more, but now that she supposedly had it all, why did she seem more desperate than ever? The answer came from an unexpected source. Claire, Thomas's wife, taught at an exclusive private school in Manchester. One of her colleagues had a husband who worked in financial regulation. At a dinner party, he mentioned a major fraud investigation involving a tech startup called NeuroVantage, the same company Elaine had mentioned investing in. When Claire called to tell me, her voice was tight with concern. "Marian, I don't know if this is the same company, but if it is, this is serious. People could go to prison." The pieces began falling into place. Elaine's sudden wealth, her desperate push to get control of my assets, the trust that would shield my house from whatever storm was coming. I spent that night looking through old photo albums, pictures of Elaine graduating from college, her face shining, with pride and ambition. Her wedding to Jeffrey, both of them looking not so much in love as aligned in purpose. And then photos of her with the twins as babies, the only time I'd ever seen her truly vulnerable, truly open. What had happened to that woman? Had money changed her so completely, or had she always been this person, and I'd been too blinded by maternal love to see it? The next morning, I made a decision. I called my bank and spoke with Mr. Peterson, who had handled our accounts since Richard and I bought this house. I explained my concerns and asked for his advice about protecting my assets, not from my own poor judgment, but from my daughter's schemes. "I'm sorry you're facing this, Marian," he said gently. "Unfortunately, we see this more often than you'd think. Adult children suddenly taking interest in their parents' finances, especially when there's property involved." He helped me set up additional security on my accounts and recommended a lawyer who specialized in elder protection. "Not that you're elderly," he added quickly, "but these attorneys understand the unique vulnerabilities that can come with this stage of life." I felt a strange mix of sorrow and resolve as I implemented these protections. What kind of mother has to guard herself against her own child? Yet what kind of daughter tries to manipulate her mother out of her home? 2 days later, Thomas called with news that confirmed my worst fears. "Mom, I just got off the phone with Jeffrey. He called me, not Elaine." His voice was tight. "NeuroVantage is under federal investigation. Securities fraud, wire fraud, the works. The founders have been indicted. All assets connected to the company are being scrutinized." My hand tightened on the receiver. And Elaine and Jeffrey's investment? They could lose everything. Jeffrey says they've already had accounts frozen. But here's the thing, Mom. He paused. Jeffrey claims Elaine knew there were problems months ago. She was warned by an insider but kept investing anyway. She thought they could cash out before it all collapsed. The room seemed to spin around me. My daughter, my own daughter, had knowingly participated in fraud and now was trying to entangle my home in her scheme. "Jeffrey's talking to prosecutors," Thomas continued. "He says he was misled by Elaine about the extent of their involvement. He's trying to protect himself and the twins." "He's throwing her under the bus," I said flatly. "Maybe. Or maybe he's telling the truth. Either way, Mom, you need to be careful. Elaine is desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." After we hung up, I walked through my house, really walked through it, touching the walls Richard had painted, the banisters he had carved, the window frames he had installed. This wasn't just a structure of wood and glass. It was the physical embodiment of our life together, of the family we had built, and my own daughter wanted to use it to save herself from the consequences of her actions. I was still standing in Richard's study when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Elaine's car in the driveway. For a moment, I considered not answering, but running had never been my way. She looked terrible, her designer outfit wrinkled, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared as if she'd been crying. "Mom," she said, pushing past me into the house. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I followed her into the living room, watching as she paced the worn carpet. "I'm listening," I said. "I need your help." She stopped pacing and faced me. "There's been a misunderstanding with one of our investments. Just a temporary situation, but we need to move some assets around." What kind of misunderstanding? She waved a hand dismissively. Regulatory nonsense. Paperwork errors. Nothing serious, but it's causing some cash flow issues. I sat down in Richard's chair, feeling his presence like a steadying hand on my shoulder. Is that why you want my house in a trust? To move assets around? Her eyes widened slightly. Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? The truth is the truth, no matter who speaks it. For a moment, she seemed about to continue the lie. Then her shoulders slumped. You don't understand the pressure we're under, the lifestyle we have to maintain, the schools the girls attend, the neighborhood we live in, the social circles we move in. It all costs money. So much money. And when the money from legitimate sources ran out, you turned to illegitimate ones. Her head snapped up. It wasn't like that. Neurovantage was a real company with real technology. Yes, there were some creative accounting practices, but everyone does it. Everyone. Your father didn't, I said quietly. He worked honestly every day of his life. And what did it get him? She shot back. A modest house in a small town, a teacher wife, a heart attack at 68. Is that what you want for me, Mom, that small, insignificant life? Her words struck like physical blows. Not because they hurt me, though they did, but because they revealed how little she had understood about her father's life, about our life together. Your father was happy, Elaine, truly happy. He loved his work, his home, his family. He went to bed each night with a clear conscience and woke each morning with purpose. If you think that's small or insignificant, then I failed you as a mother. She stared at me, and for a moment I saw confusion in her eyes, as if encountering a concept so foreign she couldn't process it. Then her expression hardened. I don't have time for philosophy, Mom. I need solutions, real practical solutions. The house is worth, what, $400,000, $500,000? If you sell it and invest with us, we can triple that in a year once this blows over. If I sell it and give you the money, I'll never see it again, I said, and neither will you. It will disappear into the black hole of your fraud. It's not fraud, she nearly shouted. It's business. Sometimes the line gets blurry, but that's how fortunes are made. I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. The answer is no, Elaine. I will not sell my house. I will not put it in a trust. I will not give you money to cover up your mistakes. Whatever consequences you're facing, you'll have to face them on your own. She looked at me as if I'd slapped her. You would let your own daughter go to prison? Let your granddaughters lose their mother? The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. If you're truly facing prison, Elaine, it's not because I wouldn't sell my house. It's because of choices you made long before today. She grabbed her purse, hands shaking. You'll regret this. When it all comes out in the papers, when everyone in this small-minded town is whispering about your daughter the criminal, you'll wish you had helped me when you had the chance. As she stormed toward the door, I called after her. Elaine. She paused, but didn't turn. Whatever happens, you're still my daughter. That hasn't changed. That won't change. For a moment, her shoulders trembled. Then she straightened them and walked out without another word. The next few weeks unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. The Neurovantage scandal made national news. The founders were arrested. Investors lost millions. And my daughter's name appeared in article after article. First as a victim, then as a person of interest, finally as a co-conspirator. Jeffrey filed for divorce, claiming he had been misled and manipulated by his wife. He moved out of their Boston home, taking the twins with him. Elaine faced not only criminal charges but civil lawsuits from investors who claimed she had recruited them, knowing the company was fraudulent. I watched it all from a distance, my heart breaking anew each day. Thomas and Claire kept me updated, shielding me from the worst of the media coverage. Abigail called every evening, her nurse's instinct for care extending to me now. Have you heard from her? She would ask. And each night I gave the same answer. No. Until one day in late October when I was planting bulbs in the front garden, daffodils and tulips that would bloom in spring, long after the Vermont winter had passed. A shadow fell across the flower bed, and I looked up to see Elaine standing at the garden gate. I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. But it was her eyes that had changed the most, the ambitious fire replaced by something hollow and lost. "Mom," she said, her voice barely audible. "Can I come in?" I nodded, removing my gardening gloves and leading her inside. In the kitchen, the heart of our home, where so many family conversations had taken place, I made tea. The familiar ritual gave my hands something to do while my heart tried to reconcile the stranger before me with the daughter I had raised. We sat at the table, steam rising from our cups in the silence between us. "I lost everything," she finally said. "The house, the money, Jeffrey, the girls." Her voice broke. "My freedom, probably, once the trial is over." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I keep thinking about what you said, about Dad being happy with his life." She stared into her tea. "I never understood that. I always thought he settled, that you both settled for less than you deserved." "We didn't settle, Elaine, we chose. Every day we chose what mattered most to us." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I made the wrong choices, Mom. All of them. And now I've lost everything that ever mattered." "Not everything," I said gently. "You haven't lost yourself, not completely. The fact that you're here, that you can see your mistakes, that means there's still hope." "Hope for what? I'm probably going to prison." "Then you'll serve your time. And when you come out, you'll start again." I reached across the table and took her hand. "People rebuild their lives every day, Elaine, from worse than this." "How can you even look at me?" she whispered. "After what I tried to do to you? After what I said?" I thought carefully before answering. "Because beneath all the mistakes and the hurt, you're still the little girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. You're still my daughter." Something broke in her then, some last wall of pride or pretense. She sobbed, deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. I moved around the table and held her, the way I had when she was small, stroking her hair and letting her cry. Later, as the afternoon light slanted golden through the kitchen windows, we talked. Really talked. Perhaps for the first time since she was a teenager. She told me about the pressure she'd felt all her life to succeed, to be exceptional, how she'd married Jeffrey not just for love, but for the doors his family connections might open, how the twins' expensive private school and their Boston lifestyle had created a financial treadmill she couldn't get off. When Neurovantage approached Jeffrey about investing, it seemed like the answer to everything, she explained. The returns they were promising were incredible, and at first they delivered. We doubled our investment in 6 months. But then there were irregularities, delayed reports, excuses about why we couldn't withdraw certain funds. Jeffrey wanted out, but I convinced him to stay in. I was sure it would turn around. She shook her head. By the time I admitted he was right, it was too late. We were in too deep. "And that's when you came to me about selling the house?" She nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. "I thought if I could just get more capital, I could fix everything. Save our lifestyle, our marriage, our reputation." She gave a bitter laugh. "Instead, I lost it all anyway, and nearly cost you your home in the process." We talked until the sun set and the kitchen grew dark except for the small lamp above the stove. About regret and forgiveness, about starting over, about what truly matters when everything external is stripped away. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted as I walked her to the door. "My lawyer says I'll probably serve time, maybe 2 years, maybe more." "Whatever happens," I said, "this will still be your home. You'll always have a place to come back to." She hugged me then, clinging like she used to as a child. "I don't deserve you, Mom." "It's not about deserving," I told her. "It's about loving." After she left, I sat on the porch swing, watching night settle over Lake Champlain. The water reflected the first stars, steady points of light in the gathering darkness. I thought about Richard, about what he would say if he were here. Probably something wise and simple, something that would cut through all the complexity to the heart of the matter. "She's still our girl, Marion," I could almost hear him say. "Broken, but still ours." Winter came to Vermont with its customary severity: snow piling against the house, ice forming along the lake shore, wind howling through bare trees. Elaine's legal troubles continued to unfold. She pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against the company founders. The judge, taking into account her cooperation and lack of prior offenses, sentenced her to 18 months in a minimum security facility. The day before she was to report to prison, she came to say goodbye. We sat in the living room, the Christmas tree Richard and I had always cut from our own property, now decorated with ornaments collected over decades. "I'm scared, Mom," she admitted, looking smaller somehow in her simple clothes, her face free of makeup. "I know," I said, "but you'll get through this, and we'll be here when you do." "We?" "Thomas and Claire have been asking about you. So has Abigail. They're angry and hurt, but they're still your siblings, and the twins have been writing to me, beautiful letters. They miss their mother." Hope flickered across her face, quickly replaced by doubt. "Jeffrey will never take me back." "Maybe not as a wife," I acknowledged, "but perhaps, in time, as the mother of his children, as someone who made terrible mistakes but is working to make amends." After she left, I added a new ornament to the tree, a small silver compass Richard had given me on our first Christmas together. "So you'll always find your way home," he'd said. Now it would be Elaine's beacon, a reminder that no matter how far she strayed, there was always a path back. The months of Elaine's incarceration passed slowly. I wrote to her every week, not about her mistakes or her sentence, but about life in Burlington, the changing seasons, the book club discussions, the new family that moved in down the street, normal things, everyday things, reminders of the world that would be waiting when she returned. Thomas and Claire visited her twice, taking the long drive to the facility with a mixture of reluctance and compassion. Abigail, with her nurse's pragmatism, went monthly, bringing photographs of the children and news from home. I went every other week, watching as my daughter gradually transformed. Not back into the person she had been, that woman was gone forever, but into someone new, someone humbled but not broken, someone who had faced the worst consequences of her actions and survived. "I've been thinking about what I'll do when I get out," she told me during one visit, spring sunshine streaming through the visiting room windows. "I can't go back to finance, obviously, but maybe I could teach." The idea surprised me. "Teach what?" "Business ethics." She gave a wry smile. "Who better to explain the consequences of cutting corners than someone who's sitting in prison for it?" I thought about the generations of students I had taught, how many had gone on to lives I'd never imagined for them. "You might be exactly what some young person needs to hear." "I've been reading the books you sent," she continued, "the classics you used to teach. I never appreciated them before. Too busy looking forward to look back, I guess. And now? Now I understand why you loved them so much, why you wanted us to read them. They're all about choices, aren't they? About consequences, about what makes a life worth living." I smiled, feeling a teacher's satisfaction at a lesson finally learned. That's exactly what they're about. Summer came and went. Fall painted the Vermont mountains in fiery colors. And then, on a crisp November morning, Elaine came home. Not to my house. She had too much pride for that, even now, but to a small apartment in Burlington, not far from the high school where I had taught for so many years. The twins came for Thanksgiving, their initial awkwardness with their mother melting as they worked together in my kitchen, preparing the meal Richard had always called the Feast of Gratitude. Jeffrey came to pick them up afterward, standing uncomfortably in my doorway. He and Elaine spoke briefly, civilly, like the strangers they had become, but as he was leaving, I heard him say, "Maybe the girls could stay with you next weekend, if you're settled in." It was a small olive branch, but the joy on Elaine's face made it seem enormous. That night, after everyone had gone, we sat on the porch, despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, watching our breath form clouds in the night air. "Thank you," Elaine said suddenly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing something in me worth saving, when all I could see was my own failure." I thought about the long road she had traveled, from ambitious young woman to wealthy fraudster to convicted felon to this new, uncharted territory of redemption. I never saw you as a failure, Elaine. I saw you as someone who lost her way. I did, she agreed. Completely. But you found it again. That's what matters. She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the lake where thin ice was beginning to form along the edges. You know what I think about sometimes? That morning in the kitchen, when I said you were useless. The memory still had the power to sting, but distantly now, like an old wound mostly healed. What about it? I was so wrong. Not just morally wrong, but factually wrong. You were never useless. You were the foundation that held everything together when my life fell apart. I reached over and took her hand, feeling its strength and fragility. That's what mothers do, Elaine. We hold things together, even when it seems impossible, even when no one notices. I notice now, she said softly. I see you now, Mom. Really see you. The following spring, as the daffodils I had planted bloomed bright and hopeful in the garden, Elaine was accepted into a master's program in education at the University of Vermont. She worked part-time at a local nonprofit, helping women recently released from prison rebuild their lives. The twins spent every other weekend with her, gradually rebuilding the relationship that her ambition and absence had damaged. One Sunday morning, as we sat having coffee before she headed to church, a habit she had developed in prison and maintained in freedom, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," she urged, an unfamiliar nervousness in her voice. Inside was a letter from the university where Richard and I had met as undergraduates half a century earlier. Elaine had established a small scholarship in her father's name, funded by the modest salary she now earned, for students from teachers' families, the letter explained, to honor the legacy of Richard Caldwell and the values he exemplified. I looked up at my daughter, tears blurring my vision. "How did you manage this?" She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes that now held a depth and wisdom hard-earned. "I've been saving. It's not much, but it will help one student each year, someone like Dad, someone who believes in building things that last." That evening, I took out the family photo albums, leather-bound books that chronicled our lives together. On the first page, Richard and I on our wedding day, young and full of dreams. In the middle, our children growing, changing, becoming themselves. And at the end, new photos, Elaine with the twins at Lake Champlain, all of us at Thomas's birthday, Abigail's new baby, named Richard after the grandfather he would never meet, life continuing despite loss. Love enduring, despite betrayal. Family healing, despite wounds that once seemed fatal. A few months later, Elaine invited me to speak to her fellow students about literature and ethics, about how the stories we read shape the lives we lead. Standing in that classroom looking at my daughter among her peers, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was very young. Admiration. "This is my mother," she introduced me, "one of the wisest people I know." The words healed something in me I hadn't realized was still broken. Later that year, Jeffrey asked to meet me for coffee. We sat in a downtown cafe, awkward at first, then gradually relaxing into conversation. "Elaine seems different," he said cautiously. "She is different," I confirmed. "Prison changes people, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better." He nodded, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. "The girls talk about her all the time now. They say she really listens to them, that she's present in a way she never was before. She's learned what matters," I said simply. Jeffrey looked at me directly then, his expression serious. "Marion, I think I made a mistake. Not about the divorce, that was necessary, but about cutting her off completely, about not seeing the changes in her." "What are you saying, Jeffrey?" "I'm saying that maybe there's a way forward for us, not as husband and wife, but as parents, as people who once cared for each other. You're not asking my permission," I observed. "No," he smiled slightly. "I'm asking for your wisdom. How does someone start over after so much pain?" I thought about Richard's death, about Elaine's betrayal, about all the losses and renewals of my long life. "One day at a time," I answered, "and with a lot of forgiveness, from others and from yourself." Last night, we gathered to celebrate Thomas's birthday. After the children went to bed, Elaine asked to speak with me privately. In Richard's study, now my reading sanctuary, she sat across from me, her expression solemn. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you, something I've never told anyone." I waited, my heart quickening with concern. "That day when I said you were useless," she paused, gathering courage. "It wasn't about you at all, it was about me." "What do you mean?" "All my life, I tried to be different from you. I saw your contentment with teaching, with this house, with Burlington, and I thought it meant you lacked ambition, that you'd settled." She looked down at her hands. "I wanted more. More money, more recognition, more everything." "There's nothing wrong with ambition, Elaine. Not with ambition itself, no, but with what I was willing to sacrifice for it." She met my eyes again. "When I finally got what I thought I wanted, the money, the status, I realized I still felt empty, and seeing you so content with so much less made me feel like a failure." "Oh, Elaine, when I said you were useless, what I really meant was that your example, your life, made mine look hollow, and instead of learning from you, I tried to control you, to make you fit into my narrative." The truth of her words hung between us, painful but cleansing, like antiseptic on a wound. "I understand now," she continued, "that you and Dad weren't settling for less. You were choosing what mattered most, building a life with meaning, not just with money." I reached across the space between us and took her hand. "It took me a long time to learn that lesson too, Elaine. Your father and I had our struggles, our doubts, times when we wondered if we'd made the right choices." "Really?" She seemed surprised. "You always seem so sure." "No one is always sure, sweetheart. We just keep making the best decisions we can with what we know at the time." She squeezed my hand. "I'm trying to do that now, to make better decisions, to build something real." Today, sitting on my porch as the sun rises over Lake Champlain, I reflect on the journey we've traveled, from that terrible morning when my daughter told me I was useless, to this new day full of hard-won peace. Elaine is rebuilding her life one careful choice at a time. The twins are flourishing, carrying both the caution of having seen their mothers fall and the hope of witnessing her redemption. Thomas and Claire, Abigail and her family, we gather now without the tension that once divided us, bound by the understanding that family is both fragile and resilient. And I, who once questioned my own worth in the face of my daughter's cruel words, have found a deeper sense of purpose, not just as a mother or a widow or a retired teacher, but as a witness to the possibility of transformation, as living proof that it's never too late to begin again. The house Richard built still stands, weathering Vermont winters and welcoming Vermont springs. Like us, it bears the marks of time, a crack here, a worn floorboard there, but remains solid at its foundation. A home, a haven, a place where broken hearts can heal and new beginnings can take root. Do you believe some people need to lose everything before they can see what truly matters? Or is there a gentler way to learn life's most important lessons? I've come to believe that the heart's deepest wisdom often emerges from its deepest wounds, that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who need us most, and that forgiveness, not forgetting, but truly forgiving, can be the most powerful choice we ever make, not just for those who've wronged us, but for ourselves. The peace I feel now didn't come easily or quickly. It came through tears and sleepless nights, through anger and grief, through the slow, painful process of letting go, not of love, but of expectations. Of the daughter I thought Elaine should be, to make room for the daughter she was becoming. As the morning light spreads across the lake, turning the water to liquid gold, I think about Richard, about what he would say if he could see us now, his family wounded but healing, his daughter fallen but rising, his wife alone but not lonely. I think he would smile that quiet smile of his and say what he always said when faced with life's complexities. Just love them, Marion. The rest will follow. And so I do. Not perfectly, not without moments of doubt or pain, but consistently, steadily, like the mountains that have watched over this lake for millennia, like the waters that reflect both storm clouds and stars with equal clarity. This is the legacy I hope to leave, not wealth or property or even wisdom, but love that endures beyond betrayal, beyond disappointment, beyond words that cut like knives on a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Love that says, "You're still my daughter, that hasn't changed, that won't change." Love that waits, patient as the seasons, for wounds to heal and trust to rebuild. Love that believes in second chances, not because they're deserved, but because they're needed. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever had to love someone through their darkest moments or find your own worth when others couldn't see it, know that you're not alone. We're all walking this path together, stumbling sometimes, helping each other up, moving forward one day at a time toward whatever light we can find. And in the end, isn't that what matters most? Not the mistakes we've made or the hurts we've endured, but the love we've given and received along the way. The moments of grace that transform our pain into purpose. The courage to begin again, even when beginning seems impossible. This is what I've learned in my 67 years, that a broken heart can indeed find peace when truth comes to light, and that our greatest worth was never in what we possess or accomplish, but in the love we're brave enough to offer, even after the most devastating storms.